guys, welcome to another episode of the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast. I am your host, Boston Chris, and we have a huge treat for everybody out there this week. My buddy Mark Narmore is going to be my guest here on the 10th episode of the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark. Mark Narmore was raised and still resides in Center Star, Alabama, in the shadow of the music mecca of Muscle Shoals, Alabama. He grew up loving and emulating the sounds from those Shoals studios and has had a 37-year career as a songwriter. He graduated from Brooks High School in 1983, then attended the University of North Alabama, where he received a degree in commercial music in 1988. Mark has also worked locally as a radio announcer. He has had songs recorded by Josh Turner, Tanya Rose, Chris Golden, Bernard Allison, Brandy Clark, Reba McEntire, Alabama, John Michael Montgomery, Shenandoah, Neil McCoy, Blackhawk, Terry Clark, Sandy Carroll, Craig Morgan, Tanil Arts, Big Daddy Wilson, Carly Pierce, Coco O'Connor, and many, many others. His song, That's What I Love About Sunday, was the most performed song in country radio in 2005, according to Billboard magazine, and spent 5 weeks at number one. Also, it was the number 8 Billboard country song of the 2000s decade and achieved gold sales status. His very first cut was on the Shoals supergroup Shenandoah, the solely penned Moon Over Georgia, which became a top 5 hit nationally. Mark was also co-writer along with Walt Aldridge on the number 2 country hit by Blackhawk, Like There Ain't No Yesterday. Mark was awarded a Bronze Star for his musical achievements, which is on permanent display in the lobby of the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. We are super excited to have this time with the one and only Mark Narmore. Y'all check it out. I also need to thank Mark for performing not one, but 2 of his original songs that went on to be humongous hits for other artists. These 2 songs are going to bookend the interview. The first one you're going to hear is the super hit, number 8 for the 2000s decade. That's What I Love About Sunday. And then after the interview, Mark is going to also play us the first cut, which was a top 5 hit for Shenandoah, called Moon Over Georgia.
Hey y'all, it's Billy Joe Jones. Thanks for tuning in to the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast.
Raymond's in his Sunday best, usually up to his chest in the oil and grease. There's a Martin's walking in with that mean little freckle-faced kid. Broke a window last week. Oh, sweet Miss Betty like to sing off key in the pew behind me. That's what I love about Sunday. Sang along as a choir swayed every verse of Amazing Grace. Never shake a preacher's hand, go home and do your routine. That's a chicken, that's a big bean. Pick a backyard football team. Not do much of anything. That's what I love about Sunday. Stroll to the end of the drive, pick up the Muscle Shoals Times, grab my coffee cup. Well, it looks like Sally and Ron finally tied that knot. Well, you know it's about time. They got 35 cents off the ground round, baby. Cut the coupon out. That's what I love about Sunday. Catnapping on that porch swing. You curled up next to me. Smell of jasmine, birds of flames in that wide open. Steal a kiss as the sun fades. That's what I love about Sunday. Yeah, yeah. New believers getting baptized. Mama's hands raised up high. Have a hallelujah good time. Smile on everybody's face. That's what I love about Sunday. Oh, yeah, going to church there, eh?
So here is our one-on-one interview with the one and only Mr. Mark Narmore. Check it out. Hey guys, man, what a treat we have here. We have Mark Narmore, an amazing singer-songwriter from the Muscle Shoals area of Alabama. And I do have to be preemptive here in how Mark and I met. We served, quote-unquote, on the same panel for Alabama Idol. I think it was 2018 or 2017, somewhere in there. So it's been a minute. And got to chat with Mark, and I already knew who he was. Huge fan of his work, and just a huge honor to have you here on the show, Mark. How have you been doing, man?
Doing wonderfully well, Chris, and just what an honor to be on your show and to see you again. And I remember us speaking before. We were just, talking and having fun at the Idol thing that we did here in Alabama. So it's good to hook back up, brother.
Yeah,
You're looking
absolutely.
good.
You're looking good as well, man. I was excited
Right.
to reach out to you. We just started with the podcasting thing again after like 4 or 5 years. So I already had like a mental list in my head. If I ever do this again, I know who I want to talk to. And Mark, you were one of the first. You and Joe
Well,
Doyle.
what an honor. It makes me feel very, very privileged, Chris.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
So, very first question is always meant to kind of break the ice. It's not a serious question. What are your favorite drinks, Mark? What have you been drinking, alcoholic or not?
Let's see what I usually drink, man. Some of my go-tos are cranberry juice and tomato juice, believe it or not. You
Okay.
believe that?
Yeah, I do
And
actually.
I like to chill them down really super cold, man. I mean, just Arctic cold. But yeah, tomato juice I've always liked, and even when I fly, people laugh at me. I'll get the V8 on ice.
Mhm. My dad used to drink tomato juice a lot. He said it was the best breakfast he could have, and the amount of time he always had for breakfast. So,
Smart man. Yeah.
yeah, he'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna." And plus, he would when he went to the bar room after work. Of course, he would have like the beer and tomato juice, and felt like he was getting his veggies. You know what I mean?
That's right. And I know some people do mix, is it vodka they mix and they make a Bloody Mary?
Yeah, yeah,
They do that too. Willie Nelson actually recorded a record here in the Shoals, Chris, called Bloody Mary Morning
sure
at
did.
Muscle Shoals Sound here. So that's pretty intriguing. Huh?
And man, I do want to talk about the Muscle Shoals area here in a little while. It's such an untapped, underrated region of the world as far as music goes. I mean, there's so much talent that's come from there, yourself included. I want to talk about that here in a minute. But first things first, let's start way back when you first got on the planet in Muscle Shoals. What effect did that musical history in that area? What effect did that have on a young Mark Narmore?
Chris, people ask that quite a bit, but it had a huge, profound effect. And I also saw it have an effect for my peer group, other musicians that were coming up at the same time as me. It was almost like a miracle, Chris, that this music industry was happening in our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And although we were pretty young, we couldn't go participate per se. If you're 10 years old, you can't weasel away into the recording studio, but you hear about it and you always hear about it after the fact, which was the case for Muscle Shoals, because the artists would come in sort of incognito and sort of hidden, and
Yeah.
they kind of were chill. The musicians here were chill about it. But afterward, after they left, they could beacon the neighborhood. The Rolling Stones were in town, or Cher, or whoever. So that had a profound effect on me. Chris, maybe had I not been born here, I wouldn't have had a huge interest in recording and writing and playing music if I had not been born in a music center like this.
And geographically speaking, I mean, you're in southern U.S., so country's always going to be a part there, but also blues and jazz and stuff like that. You're within a few hundred miles of all of these different epicenters for different genres. What did
Right.
that do for you? Because I know that your music, you're known for country music, but really, you're more jazzy and bluesy than what your songs that you're known for are.
Yes, you're right. There was some pull from listening to Nashville radio and the hits, but I grew up really. I started playing piano at age 5. So by age 10 or 11, I was playing in church. I mean, funky gospel. You can imagine here in Muscle Shoals, it
Right.
wasn't the aria, really proper sounding things you would think of church music. We were funky, man. We were like
Mm.
really soulful. So I picked up on that piano styling, and that's sort of core for me over all the years is the gospel piano.
Right. And that's definitely a different path. I mean, every songwriter has a different path to their creative process, but with you, it's always been piano. With a lot of other folks, it's the acoustic guitar. It can even be percussion. But I
Right.
always love to hear the different. People get there the same way, but the vehicle to get there is often different between different songwriters. And that's always interested me as a pianist, how you get there differently than an acoustic guitarist might. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. And I like guitar too. I'm not a great guitarist, but when I was working for Fame here in the Shoals, Rick Hall told me, he said, "Son, you're playing too many ballads on that piano. You need to
Right.
write us some up-tempo song." So around Fame, there were so many great guitar players. So I sort of
Mm.
mimicked they were sort of mimicking James Taylor,
Hmm.
Chris. They were
Yeah.
doing the finger picking and 70s sounding beautiful chords. So I was trying to do mimicry just a little bit on the guitar playing, but I'm not great at it.
And how much of your inspirations as a youngster in the area were local artists? Like how much were you polling locally as opposed to national radio and mainstream?
At the time when I was 10 or 11, probably not so much mainstream radio from local acts, but my first cousin, Spooner Oldham, he was one of the guys that got the Muscle Shoals scene started. So he was on board with the Aretha Franklin sessions at
Wow.
Fame, Wilson Pickett. So Spooner's 20 years older than me. He still lives around the Shoals, but he also had a profound influence on me because I knew, we had record albums laying in our home, and I'd say, "Mom, who is Aretha Franklin, and what is this? Why do we have this?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, your cousin Spooner. Look on the back. He played piano and organ on this
Wow.
whole record." And so I'm going like, "Wow, I'm in. I want to do this.
That's
I
amazing.
want to be like Spooner."
That's amazing. And so you did end up going to school, University of North Alabama, and you were interested in music enough that you made music essentially your degree was in commercial music. Um,
Yeah, yes, it
what
was.
what
It
benefits
was.
did the degree have for future Mark Narmore in the music industry?
For some reason, I always liked words and the English language, and I just think the music business degree probably did help, maybe like with studio techniques, because I got to hang with some great engineers, and they would, you're an engineer yourself and piano player, so learning those little tips and tricks, they
Hmm.
last for a lifetime. But also just the universality, universal knowledge, improving my vocabulary, being to speak on podcasts 40 years later with you and sound like an intelligent human being. I think it's helped me in life just having a good vocabulary. That's what one thing college did, really.
Nice. And I know that vocabulary and syllable count and all that stuff is important in the creation of a song as well. So there is
So it
that.
all parlays together, doesn't it? Yes.
Yeah, it's funny looking back now that we're older. I'm not going to say old, but older. It's funny how
Yeah.
our situations and our experiences always kind of prepare us for the things that we're meant to do later on. Isn't that funny?
It really is. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Meant to be almost, predestined.
Okay, so tell us about the first time you kind of dipped your toes into the songwriting world, and looking back at those times, what mistakes can the older, more wise Mark Narmore see that you didn't know at the time?
Well, the first song I wrote, I remember the song. It was sort of patterned after, believe it or not, the Partridge Family or say Bobby Goldsboro,
Let's go.
because when I was 10 years old, we would get the Kellogg's box of cereal. I don't know if you remember this. On the back, occasionally would be a record, like a
Yeah.
35, like a thin record. You'd have to put coins on it, but I had one with the Partridge Family and Bobby Goldsboro. So I was trying to mimic and make up songs in my head that sounded like the sound of the day. And this one song, it was, you got to have courage to go on through this world. Courage. You can't thank no one but a girl. Courage and someone else to see you through. Courage makes your life brand new. So I'm 10 years old writing this song, and really, all in all, it didn't make any sense. It just sort of sounded like the cadence of what I was hearing and the words and courage, and girl was and you hear that in songs a lot. So I was mimicking and not learning how to make sense yet with my songwriting. And then at 14 years old, I was playing in with we were two dudes playing guitar, me and my friend Brent, and we were going to talent shows. And I wrote this song called Love Me or Leave Me. Again, it was a rock song. Looking back, it did not make the chorus didn't even make any sense at all. But it sounded, the cadence of the words came off the tongue really well. And it's like, like zipper zapper, purple porpoise. I mean, not that, but it was just,
Mhm.
it was almost like random words that didn't make sense. Love me or leave me.
How important to you as a songwriter is alliteration like that? The same sounding syllables and stuff.
Maybe it comes from that primordial thing we're talking about there when we're young. It's very important to me. Very, very important. The literary devices and especially alliteration, imagery has always been super important to me, especially in country music where you have to create sort of a movie in 3 minutes. I think it helps to be able to put furniture in there, visuals that people,
Mhm.
boom, bammo, they get the picture automatically sometimes, right?
Yeah, that's definitely something that over the years has, I think, eroded quite a bit with country music and other genres. And I mean,
Right.
thankfully, there's still lots of artists out there that imagery is important. But do you feel like the modern songwriter is not paying attention to that the drapes, so to speak, of a song?
Probably up until about a year or two ago, and I started really delving in and listening to like current country music artists like Jelly Roll, Cody Johnson, especially Cody and some of the other artists. I'm hearing a little bit of folkness about the lyrics. So
Yes, yeah.
that's very nice that that's sort of emerging back into it a little.
Thank God for that too, because like
Yes.
again, the music and the lyrics especially was really getting watered down. So Cody's a good example.
Yeah.
Jelly Roll definitely as well. Post Malone. There's even some
Yeah.
pop songwriters today are really doing a good job of bringing in a story to the song.
Right. Exactly, man. I totally agree, brother.
So I have heard a story that your very first cut, now you tell me if this is true or not, became a top 5 hit, and that was Moon Over Georgia. Was that your
That,
first
that's,
cut?
that was my very first cut. I was a baby. I was
What
little.
in the world? So so what's it like having that like instant success as a songwriter?
You know, it was like I said, growing up here in Muscle Shoals was kind of magical, almost miraculous. When I had that, it was a double miracle. It's like, what? I mean, I couldn't believe it. You know, it was like almost, Chris, like I could stop what I was doing. I could quit at that point and be a happy man. I would never have done that. But I was thinking, man, I could quit right now and I'd be on top and I would be happy.
So it takes the pressure off then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Once you kind of have that, it's like, you know, you may have another one, you may not. You may have 20, but at least you got the one and nobody can steal that from you.
Right. And is
You
that
know,
a,
they can't take
is
it away.
when you have something like that, is that like an arrow in your quiver? Like you can pull that out and just let people know, hey, remember this? You know, like this
Oh,
can.
most definitely. Yes, indeed, Chris. And even more so, I was blessed enough to have written it by myself.
Wow.
And as a young man, I had this song that was a hit. I'd written it by myself, so that was a super arrow in my quiver, you know, to pull out. And great calling card even today. When I mention that, it's just really impressive that people do a lot of times remember that. You know.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, you're essentially a rookie, and you needed no help, and you pitched the entire game yourself, essentially. You know.
Exactly, man. And it happened all here in Muscle Shoals too. It was recorded here, and the story about it. If we get into it, there's an interesting story about the day it was recorded and what I was doing and all this stuff.
I would love to hear it. Yeah, please.
Let me make it a little concise because it could be a long story.
It's all good.
And I know you've worked and done radio and broadcasting and TV. I was working in radio. I was working still in college, just started college actually in Florence, Alabama, which is 20 minutes from my home in Center Star. Shenandoah, I knew that they were recording it. I wrote songs at Fame, which is in Muscle Shoals. It's a publishing company, a studio where Aretha Franklin had her big hits. But the country group Shenandoah, they're from here also in the Muscle Shoals area.
Yep.
And we were all just sort of camped out at Fame, hanging, writing, playing. And they formed this group and got a record deal. And they liked this song of mine that I had made a demonstration recording of, you know, and they liked it. And I had some letdowns like we all do. So I didn't put too much credence in it because usually when somebody likes a song, it's 99% of the time it doesn't happen, right? I mean, that's one of the facts of life.
That's the
So
nature of the beast for sure. Yeah.
that's the nature. So I was jaded to the point, even as a young man. But this happened like in November of '89. I'm sitting at the radio station. I'm the only employee there. It was a small station. So they had me sign on in the morning, sign off in the evening. I'm young, so I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it went off the air at night. So there was no boss there. He was in Atlanta that day. There was nobody else I could call when Rick Hall's secretary called the radio station and said, Mark, I know you're 40 minutes away in Lexington, Alabama, but we're about to record your song in about an hour. We wanted to give you a heads up if you
What?
could get somebody to fill in for you. And I hung up. I said, man, I'll do what I can. But I knew there's nobody. I could not leave dead air.
Right.
Or I'm going to get in trouble with the FCC and, you know, whoever, radio station owners. So I think, what in the world do I do? I thought, I call mama.
Of
And I
course.
called
Yeah.
up my mom. She was 20 minutes away, but I said, Mom, I need to teach you how to run this radio station really quick. And she said, I'll be there because mamas will help their babies any way they can.
Yeah. No Google to help here either. So like.
No Google. So I gave her the basics. I showed her how to take the 45 record or the album, the 33, cue it up, you know, get it ready, tell the people queuing up is getting it ready to play.
Mm-hmm.
I showed her where it comes up on the mixing board. I said, don't turn the mic on. You won't need that. We had all the station IDs on cartridges, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the commercials were on cartridges. And there were little station liners, you know, WLX, the Valley's best country. So she could play those. And it actually sounded like somebody is there I said, we're going to close the blinds, lock the door, don't answer for anything. There were no cell phones.
That's great.
So I said, I'll be back. I'll be back in 3 or 4 hours. She held the fort down. I got to go 40 minutes away to Fame and hear Moon Over Georgia being recorded. Isn't that amazing?
Wow. Mama saved the day, didn't she?
She saved the day. When I got back, I opened up that door. She was still spinning records.
She was after your job at that point, probably having a good time.
She was, man.
You didn't tell me this was this easy, Mark. What are you doing? Come on now.
Yeah.
So we talk about staff writers. We hear that a lot as people maybe outside the business. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What exactly is a staff writer?
A staff writer, my first staff gig was there at Fame, which is here in Muscle Shoals. And in the 60s, lots of R&B acts were cut there. Rick Hall was the producer. He was one of the engineers and architects of Muscle Shoals, as was my cousin Spooner. So staff writers were just exclusive writers. You signed over your publishing rights to that particular publisher.
Mm-hmm.
So like with Fame, I signed a contract maybe I think it was for 1 year and 2 options. So it's in effect a 3-year deal where Rick Hall can say, okay, year 2, I'm not going to re-up your deal. Or, he has options to get out if I'm not doing really good,
Right.
So, but that exclusive deal, I give them my publishing at that point. I know you can structure it many different ways, but they got my entire publishing portion. Of course, I kept my songwriters portion.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, I hear of people doing co-publishing deals, don't you?
I've heard a little bit about it. Yeah, it's kind of a new concept. I guess where they're not quite signing away all of their rights when it comes to being a staff writer, and I think that's maybe the best growth for that. Maybe that should have happened a long, long time ago. To be fair,
Yeah, right. Yeah, because it didn't happen too much back in the old days, but you're right. It's sort of found its way in, and it seems like a more perfect way.
Yeah, and I mean, essentially, for those who may be hearing about this concept for the first time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but essentially the way it would work is a young writer like yourself would get signed to a publishing deal. You're essentially signing away your publishing rights to anything that you write while you're a staff writer exclusively with that company. Like you said, you still hold your writing credits to that, and you can get monetized individually that way. But essentially what you're doing is if you're, maybe you're not well enough off financially to publish your own stuff, by yourself independently, you sign that away in order to essentially meet that part of your creative process. And it's kind of like an advance, sort of, right? Kind of like an advance.
It is an advance. It's recoupable against your royalties. But you're right. Say Fame, for instance, they had a great studio. We had great musicians. So when I did a demo, and that, for the people that don't know, that's a demonstration recording.
Mm-hmm.
You make it sound just like a record. And we had the great studio. So Fame, that was part of their deal. They could offer me great sounding demos that sounded like records, which enhances, like, I think, when a producer and artist hear a great demo that sounds like a record, I think a lot of times it really helps because that quality, that fidelity.
Absolutely. I think the session players and the equipment and engineers and the things that Fame has at their fingertips is definitely a huge advantage to a songwriter, I think.
Yeah. Yes, it was. And also being in a company that's having hits, they were having hits like There's No Getting Over Me. Walt Aldridge was a staff writer there.
Mm-hmm.
Holding Her and Loving You, Earl Thomas Conley. So also they were credible, they were bona fide. So they were going out. The possibility of me getting recordings and songs recorded by other people was high because Fame was successful.
Right,
so
exactly.
It was a good company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the gig to get. Like, if you're going to be a staff writer, like places like Fame and Mara Music, and there's so many others that
Yes.
just come with that
Sure.
reputation for sure.
Amen. Yes.
So, as a staff writer, the way I pictured it in my head is kind of like the cubicle effect that you see in the movies, right? Where you just have a room where there's just cubicles everywhere, and then you got writers lined up. That's the way I picture it. I know that's not how it works, but first question is there competition amongst the different staff writers in the same publishing company, or is there more of a camaraderie effect between writers?
That's very interesting because thinking back on all the deals I've had, there really is an unspoken competition there because we're human beings. We're all wanting to get those big cuts, not to the point of where there's any really envy or meanness, but there definitely is that because that helps drive you to be better, to compete with
Mm-hmm.
the next guy and try to, but at Fame, we had such great songwriters. Walt Aldridge was there. I think he was Songwriter of the Year, Chris, in 1981, country writer, because he had written Holding Her and Loving You, There's No Getting Over Me, and probably about 10 other big hits later on. But Robert Byrne also was there, and he had written I Can't Win for Losing You, Earl Thomas Conley, Once in a Blue Moon. So us younger guys, see, Walt and Robert were 10 years my senior. So me, Daryl Worley, do you remember Daryl,
Of
country
course, yeah,
artist?
absolutely, yep.
He's my age. We were both at Fame together, about the same age, looking up to Walt and Robert and sort of learning a lot from Rick Hall too and
So
those
that
older guys.
trickle down, that you get that trickle down effect.
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes, yes.
Yeah, just being in the man. When I was the one time I was in Muscle Shoals, we got to see Fame, and we went to the theater and we went to the different radio stations around there, promoting the things we were doing there. But man, it's such a rich history in that area, and as a music fan, knowing the things that happened there, it just brings goosebumps to your skin. I can't imagine what it would be like actually working under some of those people or next to some of those people.
Yeah, me neither. I was dreaming of it, at age 10 because I knew my cousin Spooner was actually playing on some of those records, but it's almost like a miracle thing, Chris, because there were so many discrepancies that happened in so many of those sessions that normally would have derailed a session, but it's almost like they had to dig deep and find a way to overcome adversity
Yep.
in some of those sessions, and it was just magical and like you're kidding me. And as we go along, I have a couple of stories I'll share that I know about
Absolutely,
that.
please do. So
Sure.
how when you're working at Fame again, this is a huge deal for a young guy, for any guy really, but especially for a young songwriter. You come in, your first cut is literally a top 5 hit. So how first of all, did the hit help you with your writing after that? And really the concept I'm looking at here from you is like was it easier for you to get co-writers now, to get collabs or bounce ideas off of another songwriter simply because you had that first cut success?
Right. It did help get other co-writers, but it almost wrecked my brain and my mentality because I was in my early 20s and I wasn't ready for that big hit. So I tried to do cookie cutter Moon Over Georgia's. I just didn't have the sense, I didn't have the experience to move on and write something, take the experience and write something different. I was trying to go back to the well because it worked for me. It's like conditioning, operant conditioning. I mean, it worked, had a big hit. So I'm going like the mouse, going back to
Mhm.
do what worked.
So you
And
think
that wasn't,
so as a young inexperienced songwriter, you're thinking, okay, this was easy. I did this. It went out there. It's top 5.
yeah,
Perhaps you got a little bit of confidence going on. So basically, you're just trying to recreate the same magic within the same box, essentially.
and, and it did not work. I mean, it was like I had what's called sophomoric jinx, where
Yes.
when you're sophomore year, you do good the freshman year, but sophomore year, you are kind of down in the doldrums. So I was, man, I didn't know what to do. they were trying to even coach me, and I always heard this my whole life: right tempo, right tempo. But I was a lyric guy, and
Mhm.
a lot of times you couldn't get the great lyrics in those tempo songs. So I'm going, I want to write great lyrics, you know. So I kept writing ballads, and it was quite a while before I had another cut, Chris. I mean, it was a learning
Mhm.
curve that you know, you can have a hit like that, but it doesn't mean you will automatically have another one behind it
Yeah, complacency, I imagine, can set in, and that's a really hard thing to drive away once it's there. You know what I mean?
once it's there. And then I'm like kind of scrambling. You're getting kind of nervous because year 3 of your deal, year 4. So miraculously, I had Mr. Walt Aldridge there in the building 5 years after Moon Over Georgia, or actually 4. I went up to his office. You've been at Fame. He was in the upper office
Okay.
upstairs,
Yeah, yeah.
and I always looked up to Walt so much, even almost nervous sometimes, of like, here's my offering of a song title, you know, sir, you know, and
Yeah.
but he loved this one title I had, and I told him, I said, I wish we could write a George Jones song. It's called Like There Ain't No Yesterday, a double entendre type song, and I've always loved those. I know you have too, the double twists.
Yep.
So
Wordplay.
Walt said, yeah, wordplay. So Walt said, no, I don't think we should write it really country. I think he said, I just had a hit on this group called Black Hawk. Sure can smell the rain.
Hmm.
And he said, I've kind of got an in there with them. Why don't we rock it up a little bit and kind of do it like Henry Paul, you know, and the band would do it, Black Hawk. And you know what? It worked, man. We rocked it, and it was I think a number 2
Yep.
record
It
in the
was very,
country.
very, very successful, that tune. And Blackhawk, I definitely feel that. Like, I think they definitely made the song for sure. So that was a good call.
They did. So that was 5 years, though, like you're saying, you know, from me thinking, man, I had Moon Over Georgia. Wow, Eureka, I found out how to do it. It was 5 years before I
Hmm.
had another one.
Right, and a completely different style of song as well. So like you finally got out of that
Exactly.
box. So that's good to know. And then like
Yes.
fast forward to 2004 when the real big stuff starts happening for you. And I want to talk briefly about that's what I like about Sunday. But again, with the wordplay in this song, it's a story from beginning to end. Regardless of what genre you play this song in, you're gonna feel the story first. I feel right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I came from that. What brought me to songwriting was the lyric and the great Nashville lyrics, the twist, and you said wordplay and
Mm-hmm.
double entendre, and it's just brilliant to me. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
3 meanings with one phrase can mean 3 or 4 different meanings. I mean, that's just genius to me.
Yep, and then trying to work through all of those meanings in 3 minutes, man. Like even that to me as a listener, a consumer, that is genius to me.
That is very genius. So yeah, Nashville songwriting had my ear. You know, I was a famed Muscle Shoals writer, but we were getting our songs recorded mainly in Nashville.
Right.
Those country
And
songs.
just a geography lesson for folks out there who may not know, Nashville is not really that far from Muscle Shoals. It's almost
No,
directly north, and I mean, you can get
yeah,
there in less than a couple hours, if I remember correctly.
that
Um,
is correct.
so
And I've commuted in.
I remember appearing on or not appearing, but being on a radio station in Muscle Shoals in the morning, and then noontime rush. We were at one in Nashville, and then that night we were at one in Memphis. It was crazy, like how
Yeah,
close
it's
everything is,
so
kind of.
accessible. Like you mentioned before, these music centers, Muscle Shoals is in northwest Alabama. We have Memphis to the west, a
Hmm.
couple 2.5 hours. Nashville, 2 hours to the north. If you want to go to Atlanta, it's only 4 hour
Hmm.
drive. So
And to be fair,
yeah,
like the blues of Mississippi and in southern Louisiana is not too far either. To be
it's
honest.
not far either, man. I love New Orleans, and yeah, only an 8 hour drive down there also, right?
So yeah, let's pick apart. That's what I like about Sunday a little bit. So first of all, just for our viewers and listeners out there, this was a song that was co-penned by Mark and Adam Dorsey.
Yes,
And
Adam.
it was released by Craig Morgan. The song spent 5 weeks at #1. Was ultimately Billboard's #8 country song for the entire decade of the 2000s.
Right.
I'm going to come at this at a little bit different, hopefully a different journey than you may be used to with this song. One thing I always found interesting about this particular song was the success of the song. Reportedly, it was the first ever, and you may not even know this, Mark. Maybe I'll teach you something, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you probably do know this. It was the first ever independently distributed single to have 5 weeks or more at #1. The first
You
ever.
know, I did not know that. That's wow.
Yep, it's the first, and it might still to this day be the only one. I don't know that for sure, but I do know after research that it is again the first ever independently distributed single to have 5 weeks or more at #1. So first, tell us the story about how the song was conceived, and secondly, do you think it was what was it about the song that you think made it so successful, even though it kind of traveled an unconventional road to get to success?
The way we had the song originally, Adam Dorsey, my co-writer. Speaking of staff writers, I was working at a company called Jody Williams Music
Mm-hmm.
around the year 2000, 2001. And he was affiliated with Sony ATV Tree. So it was actually a co-venture with Sony and Jody Williams. So Adam Dorsey was another staff writer at Jody Williams Music. I
Okay.
was a staff writer there. Josh Turner was a staff writer there. Liz Rose was a
Oh my
staff writer
gosh.
there, all at the same time, who had like 20 Taylor Swift
Yeah.
#1.
Liz
So,
Rose is
so it was a good
amazing. Oh my
stable.
gosh.
It was a real inspiring small company, but a really good stable of songwriters there. So Adam comes to me one day and he said, Adam Dorsey grew up in Los Angeles and liked country music, but he was not a country boy per se. And he knew I grew up in Alabama. And he said, man, I want us to write a song about what goes on in the South on Sundays with church and all these things. And he said, Mark, I know you know all about it. So we just set out to write a song. And he already had the hook. That's what I love about Sundays. So easy enough. We went to a Chinese buffet in Franklin. I came up to Nashville that day, and really, to me, important in the song was the rhyming pattern of the triplicate, the three rhymes that kind of fall da 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 Hyundai, da 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 one way, da 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 Monday, and then off, A
Mhm.
da 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 da. It was fun to put those three rhymes da 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 lampshade, da 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 Kool Aid, da 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 waylaid. And I'm making up weird things, but to me, those three, the triplicate rhymes, the A, and
Mhm.
then the B rhymes were crucial. It made it really fun and smooth. It made us really want to jump in there and write cool, interesting rhyming words.
Did the song fight you at all along the way? Because you know what I mean by like a lot of times you know you're onto something, but you're just a hair away from feeling like it's ready. Did the song fight you at all, or was it just smooth going all the
You know,
way?
song but before that, Chris, songs fought me so much I was fighting in the back. But Sunday did not fight us. We sort of wrote it all in one day. Like we started at the
Wow.
Chinese restaurant, then we went on to Music Row to Jody's office, and I know we overwrote. I mean, we were like having fun and making up crazy things like I was just doing, and we had just a plethora. And we knew we had the core, like 98% of it that day. And another thing you asked why I thought it was so special. Adam Dorsey was a big fan of Shenandoah and always liked Moon Over Georgia and always liked sort of my almost James Taylor. We talked about James Taylor before. Smooth vocal cadence, easy flowing, kind of cascading, really chill. And
Hmm.
to me, Moon and Sunday kind of have that James Taylor easiness about them, right? maybe.
Well, if you didn't know the songwriter, you would certainly. I would hope people would hear the similarities in that. I mean, for me, I hear both of those songs. I know they came from you. I'm a fan of yours, so I know immediately. Like, wow, there's a lot of similarities there. But at the same time, the songs are obviously different enough that they're not in the
Right,
same
right,
box. You know.
right. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. But
So, again, this, I mean, I have to put this in perspective for maybe some of our younger listeners out there. Um, Today, there's hundreds of thousands of independent distribution companies. I mean, so many. Back then, not so much. To try to have anything independently distributed was, I mean, to keep it completely real, it was death for a song typically back in
it
those
was
days.
death. It was so rare to the point that my publisher, Jody Williams, he's a great guy and one of the most successful publishers in Nashville. But we were thinking, he said, okay, Mark, I've got some news. This was like at the end of 2004. He goes, Craig Morgan, on Broken Bow, which was an independent label, I think he's gonna cut our song, and they're talking about a single on it, and we're going like, oh well, it's better than a shark poke in the eye with a sharp stick.
Yep.
It's an independent label, so that's what we're both thinking. Oh well,
On to the
hmm.
next. Yep.
On to the next. Then it really after that, this thing started taking off, and Broken Bow, they had a good promotion team there in house. And it just was taking huge jumps, like 5-notch jumps each week, or maybe sometimes 10. And me and Jody and Adam were looking at it like, we're not believing this.
Yeah, I can
It was,
imagine.
yeah.
That's
And then it
crazy.
gets like, yeah, top 10, and then we're like, okay, it'll probably fizzle out at 9. And then it keeps going, and it's 5 weeks at number 1. And just the timing was right, for that kind of song. I think it was still post 9/11, those positive, good
Mhm.
songs, good feeling songs, and they were still happening, weren't they? So I think it caught kind of the tail end of that little influx of 9/11 positivity
Well,
songs.
not to mention, man, we're sitting here 20 years later. This is the 20-year anniversary of that song, and it is just as relevant today as it was back then. If you wrote it in the 70s, it would have been relevant then. And I mean, relevancy is really important in a song, and as I'm sure you know. But
Yeah, yes.
kudos, man, on a timeless song that will always be, and just an amazing song. A good question that could be here, I suppose, is what benefits and or pitfalls do you feel this song opened for you after its release? Was there good and bad, or was it all good?
With Sunday, by that point, because I was really hungry, it had been a long time again since I had a single on the radio. I don't think there were any pitfalls because I had been writing songs for 20 years, so I kind of learned the game and learned the ups and downs. So it was gravy to me. I sort of just sat back and enjoyed the heck out of everything that song was doing. And still 20 years that have gone by, it's been another calling card for me. I can say I co-wrote That's What I Love About Sunday, and people like perk up and yeah, let's write. So it really is a calling card, like Moon Over Georgia
Yeah. Do you
was.
ever get when you get this huge hit? Do you ever get tired of talking about it?
I never ever do because really songwriters, we don't have to do as much of that per se as like an artist would write,
Mm.
of course, because they talk every day about things all day long. So mine is kind of saved up like for every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks I'll do one of these, or maybe every 6 weeks. So I'm ready to talk about it. It's like the genie's let out of the bottle.
Awesome. So here's a question I don't think many that gets asked very often, and I don't typically I wouldn't ask something like this because I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a question that I think people should know, or maybe for me I'm very inquisitive, so maybe it's just me. But what's it like to have a song or a piece of art in general, whether it's a song or whatever that could be deemed as your masterpiece? In this case, That's what I love about Sunday for you. Everybody knows it, but you as the songwriter still maintain relative anonymity. What's that like? That everybody knows your work, but not necessarily your face.
It's kind of beautiful because I really never wanted to be an artist per se.
Right.
So it's been beautiful. Early on, I was telling you, I was playing in these Southern rock bands locally here, and I was always the lead singer guy. So I knew I had those chops at the time, young, decent looking. But the problem I had as a youngster was a shyness and social anxiety problem. And I knew my heart of hearts, I could not have done the rigors of the road and the meetings. So I felt like I was meant to be behind the scenes as a songwriter. So it's worked, and I've never regretted that at
Yeah.
all. People not knowing me, and sometimes, I mean, I will talk about it all day, but I sometimes I don't mention it. Like you're sitting at the mechanic shop reading a magazine, and people are talking about things. I never bring it up really.
Yeah, it's just it's cool. Like I have a friend named Heather Little. She's responsible for, I don't know if you've heard of Heather, but she wrote Gunpowder and Lead for Miranda
Oh,
Lambert, and
yeah, I heard it this evening on the way to this podcast.
yeah,
I
she
sure
is
did.
absolutely amazing. And she told a story on one of my podcasts back in the day where she was working custodial work at the local high school. And she's literally in the bathroom cleaning a toilet when a girl comes in to use the restroom. And her song was the girl's ringtone on her phone. And
Oh
so,
my goodness.
literally, Gunpowder and Lead is playing while the songwriter is the next stall over cleaning the toilet.
That is one heck of a story right there, brother.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But she is out there now, and she's in Nashville now, and she's absolutely killing it. And I love to see it because she legitimately one of the best songwriters that ever existed. Anyway, we did talk about Josh Turner. You mentioned Josh Turner earlier, and I had a question about him as well. You've had over a dozen songs that I'm aware of that you and he collaborated on, and
Right.
subsequently he released those songs as well. How
Right.
hard is it for a songwriter to find a co-writer that you have that kind of chemistry with?
It's very rare to me. I mean, I sort of did it with the guys in Shenandoah, but I had a longer lasting relationship with Josh in that we've been working together 20, right past 9/11 is when we met. And we were at Jody Williams at the same company. We were both baritone singer guys that grew up in church in a small
Right.
town. So we hit it off instantly and became good buddies. And he's kept me in his loop, and we have fun. We still get together, and we don't have to get together and do music. We can just eat
Mm-hmm.
and talk about life. But we do sometimes. A song will come out of that. And he's been good to keep me on every project except for the covers. The covers album was only songs he covered that other people wrote. So,
Right.
but I've been on every other project that he's put out to date. So I'm
Well,
proud
that's
of
amazing.
Josh
I was
too.
going to ask too when you're talking about sitting around at a cookout or just shooting the shit or being at a restaurant, whatever. It's funny how songs come from those moments, right?
Oh, all the time, man, because
Mm-hmm.
I've got like a piece of mail here. I've scribbled some things on this afternoon, just scribblings, and you have to have something to write on. You grab for it, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Paper sack, in envelope.
I can't imagine what your notes looks like then.
They're,
Just-
really, they look sort of doctoral and not in a proper educated way, like scribbling, scrawling.
oh my gosh, what did I write here? I do that all the time. Oh my gosh. Man, my hand
Exactly.
doesn't even formulate how to do a pen anymore. I've been using keyboards and phones for so long. So now, like, you write just a little paragraph on something and your hand hurts from doing it. 'Cause,
I know it. You're exactly right.
I think we're
Yes.
evolving away from the written word, sadly.
Mentioning that, I'm the keyboard guy, so I have, done that all my life. When I do certain chords, like bar chords on the guitar, like I'm writing and have to do that certain pattern, I feel my wrist, I feel like it's going to fall off.
Yeah.
it hurts so bad. I'm like, oh my goodness.
It's just that muscle memory's not there anymore. You know what I
It's
mean?
not there. And
Yeah.
I never played guitar. I play it enough to write is what I do with guitar, just
Right.
enough to write songs.
So we talk about co-writing. Is it for you specifically with your process? Is it easier for you to pitch the entire game, or do you like to have a co-writer along for the ride? Is it which is easier for you?
At Fame and before I was working at Fame, I was totally writing songs by myself. For one reason, probably isolated in Alabama. You're 18 years old. So I enjoyed the luxury of being able to say exactly what I wanted to say, carte blanche, without any help or outside influences. But when I got into the commercial game and started getting a draw in advance and getting paid for it, I sort of had to felt like I had to listen, and co-writing was one of the required things that they really wanted me to do. I didn't understand it at first. I'm going like, so why do we co-write again? Can you explain that to me? But I finally, after a few years of co-writing, and you find some co-writers that work really well with you, yes, it can be very helpful. But if you find somebody maybe who isn't, and it's just a one-off, you sort of just go through it, roll through the motions, and
Yeah.
come out with a song. It might be a hit. You never know. I've learned to always stay in the room and always. I'm sort of, and you are too. We're kind of people of light and joy. I think we can move things along that were
Absolutely.
kind of stymied. And I've always been the guy that can sort of pull things out of a quagmire if it gets stuck, and be positive and be a light. Just be kind of a.
Do you feel like that co-writing process is kind of a checks and balances system too? Because then at that point, if you've got 2 or 3 writers working on the same project, it's going to take 2 or 3 writers to realize that it sucks or it doesn't suck, right? So it's kind of like a checks or balances system as well.
Yeah, yeah. And where I found where it really, really works, and you may have too, Chris, is when there are no egos in the room at all. So, like 3 writers, me and 2 others, absolutely the song is the boss and the winner. And we're really, honest to goodness, trying to make that song killer and great. To me, that's when you have magic happen because you can go through all the permutations and you're all not trying to vie for pole position and have competitive contesting each other, and
Yep.
that's happened along the way. I'll tell you, it's happened quite a bit in co-writes, and you don't voice it, but you can feel it. Maybe like a type A or an alpha person would come in and want to drive the whole show, and the other 2 writers are sitting there. You still have to find a way to make it through that co-write,
Yep.
and
The ego has to be the ego has to allow you to share ownership of that project. Otherwise, I mean, if you've got
it's
3 people who own it and only one is willing to share the ownership, then that's going to be a problem.
that big boy doesn't play well with the others, does he? That big alpha.
Yeah, and so when you're involved in that process of writing, how this would be my last one on I think on the songwriting perhaps, but how hard is it for you not to fall into maybe a lazy form of marketability when it comes to a song? So what topics are more marketable than others. Do you write within marketability, or do you just forget about the commercial aspect of the song and just write what's there?
The last 10 years or so, definitely marketability, and the younger writers, my publisher would get me with young artists, and that helps because they're really plugged into what's happening currently, and it was teaching me. I felt like an old guy getting taught, and I was learning, and I took what Rick Hall taught me is like to over prepare, overwrite. I mean, keep rewriting and rewriting. So I've always done that. I've never settled. I mean, Rick Hall taught us never to settle. I mean, even take it home 2 or 3 weeks and keep rewriting it 14, 15, 17 times,
Right.
just to make sure.
I just see so many people that fall into that trap of trying to make something marketable before it's even exists. Like even before it's created, they're trying to fit that into a certain box. And sometimes I feel like the content can be lost in that process.
Oh, most definitely, because you probably already have your sort of little turnarounds and your motifs that
Yep.
are very poppy sometimes. Sometimes the lyric, the cadence, you sort of know what it's going to do, almost like when I was 10 years old writing the Bobby Goldsboro. It's like, okay, we'll just put this together and then we know what it's going to sound like,
Yep.
and kind of prefab.
It's a struggle, that balance between
Yes,
content and marketability, I think. What's
it is.
this might be the hardest question I asked, maybe the second hardest one. What's your favorite song that you ever wrote?
You
Self-written.
know, stuff written. I'll have to really say it goes back to Moon Over Georgia, because I did toil with that one. It took me probably 6 months really to write that song. And I was a young writer, my first, and I knew it was a great idea. I knew I couldn't fumble the ball. And Rick Hall he started Muscle Shoals. He was sort of like the head coach, the big kahuna, almost like a mob boss guy that everybody respected. He had juice.
Yep.
So I had his ear, and he was really being hard on me. He was like, nope, nope, I don't, you got a great idea, but your song, Went Over Georgia, even when I would get it where I thought it was really 80% there, he was still batting me down, knocking me down. Thankful to him, I really dug somewhere, Chris, to Rick that I was trying to prove to him, because he was the head honcho guy. I was going to prove to him I was worth something. I could write a hit song. So I kept digging and digging and digging and digging. And had Rick not pushed and pressured me, I might not have written that song.
So Moon Over Georgia is your favorite song that
Oh,
you've ever written.
yes, it is.
And the very first cut as well. So you've been trying to live up to that pressure ever since, haven't you, Mark?
Oh, yes, indeed. It's still fun to play it. I love to play it.
So, last question, or second to last question, if that's okay with you. So you're writing again. I'm a songwriter nerd, so I know who Mark Narmore is. I've known for a long time. I love the process behind how art becomes, and so for me with songwriting, that's man, just getting to pick your brain is a huge thrill. So thank you for that. But your songs are very well known in Nashville and in the world of country music. But I'd also love to chat with you about a project you did called Soul Fillin Station, which is a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
more funky, jazzy, kind of bluesy record. It sounds like this
Yeah.
was a blast to make. Tell us about it.
It was so fun. My buddy Andreas Warner, who is from Zurich, Switzerland, he moved to Nashville about 15 years ago. So we meet at some kind of Muscle Shoals function, much like probably you went to some of the Muscle Shoals, Alabama type functions in Nashville. So we meet at one of these and we're talking, we both love Muscle Shoals, and he's from Switzerland and
Wow.
he knows more than I do about Muscle Shoals. So I'm like, man, you are really deep into this. So he was a really great guitar player, songwriter. So we just hit it off, started writing pretty much not country songs, but when Andreas and I would get together, we would write soul and R&B songs that were sort of like old school Muscle Shoals type songs. So it was kind of fun. It was our little niche when we got together. We would do that. And Andreas sort of coached me to be the artist for a moment. He's going like, now, Mark, you're not going to get
Yeah.
out of this scot free. He said, you're really a singer, and I'm gonna record an album on you if you don't mind. And I said, well, sure. He's recorded three albums on me today, and we just have fun writing the song. We really do delve in and put our thinking caps on like Rick Hall used to make us do. But it's not in the country music realm. It's more as you've heard them, it's more in kind of old school R&B, Muscle Shoals type
So good.
songs.
They're so good. Just like all three of them are so much fun to listen to. Um, when you're formulating the songs for this kind of project and you know that you're the artist on the song, does that change your process for writing?
It kind of does. It's sort of in a cool way. It lets me be even more creative, a little more out of the box, and I'm crazy enough as it is and wild with some of my ideas, but it sort of lets me not have really any parameters. Maybe when I was writing for a publisher or trying to write for a country artist, certain parameters do exist. So with me as an artist, less of those parameters, and more experimentation.
Yeah. It's cool to
It's
hear
brave. You
you
have to
talk
be
about
brave.
that stuff. Say what?
It's sort of, I had to be more brave because you put it out there and it's almost like you're naked, because some of this crazy wild stuff, people might think, well, he's wild and crazy,
Yeah.
but it's almost like you have to put it out there as the artist. And I feel for the other artists, because there is a nakedness and a rawness. You put yourself out there, and you're out there.
I was just going to say there's a lot more vulnerability in front of the curtain, isn't there, Mark?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
So, last question of the episode. This is always the hardest question for any creative person to answer. I call this "Who do you think you are?" And it's very simple. Who is Mark Narmore? What would your answer be to that?
You know, I really think I know now more than when I was young. But I even had this, and we touched on this a little bit. Grew up with a very positive family. I'm an only child, but grew up in church. All these loving people in the small town. I think I am, even in song co-writing appointments, I try to be fun, light, hope for, just to bring the mood up. People are having a bad day. I try to be an uplifting person. And to me, really, that's almost probably more important than any career I could aspire to, or even my songwriting career, being an uplifter, full of joy, full of peace, hope, and love, and trying to spread that to other people. That's who I am.
Yeah, one of the things that I've known about you, even prior to having the honor of meeting you, is one of the kindest human beings that I've seen. Always looking for the joy in things, and just a huge pleasure to know who you are and to be counted as a friend, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You too, brother Chris. And next time I'm going to pick your brain.
Man, what another incredible episode of the 10 Minutes with Boston Chris podcast. I got to thank Mark Narmore once again for spending almost or over an hour with me tonight. And I do want to let you guys know where you can follow along with everything that Mark has going on. We really didn't talk about his social media at the end of the show like we normally do. I was just so immersed with his knowledge and his storytelling. But you can follow along with everything Mark has going on at marknarmoremusic.com. We'll put that link in the description down below. I hope you will follow along with all that he has going on. Just an incredibly remarkable human being and incredible writer as well. But yeah, I'm going to let Mark take us out on this episode. Here is a live solo version on his piano of the first cut on Top 5 hit for Shenandoah called Moon Over Georgia. Y'all check it out.
Hey, hi, everybody. This is Joe Doyle. I want to thank you for tuning in to 10 Minutes with Boston Chris.
All right. What about a little Moon Over Georgia? He owns a big estate south of Savannah and a high-rise hotel in downtown Atlanta. Half the state of Georgia to his name. She'd be set for life in his colonial manor. They'd wear at her feet on a silver platter, but all I had to offer was the moon. She took the moon over Georgia. She'd rather have
than a gold mine. She took the moon over Georgia when it came down to this world of mine. She took the moon over Georgia. A little country house in need of expansion. It's a far cry from this South Georgia mansion. We've got our own paradise, shadow dancing till dawn with the full moon shine. Those occasional clouds all have a silver light. There really must be something about that old yellow light. She took the moon over Georgia. She'd rather have a million stars in the sky than a gold mine. She took the moon over Georgia when it came down to this world of mine. She took the moon over Georgia. She took the moon